I found his jacket in our bedroom. It wasn't mine, and I knew no other men were in the house. A cold horror gripped my heart as I stared at it, draped carelessly over the back of the chair. My mind raced, desperately searching for a rational explanation, but the truth was already sinking in. My wife, Julia, had been acting strange for weeks. She'd been receiving phone calls that she'd quickly end, claiming they were from work. She'd been more secretive with her phone, and there were times when she'd disappear for hours with vague excuses about meeting friends or staying late at the office. But I had never imagined it could come to this. As I stood there, transfixed by the sight of that jacket, my mind drifted back to happier times. Julia and I had been together for 10 years. We'd built a life, a family. We shared so many memories: vacations to the beach, holiday celebrations with our son, and the simple joy of a Sunday morning together. All those moments now felt tainted, overshadowed by the growing suspicion gnawing at my insides. I couldn't leave it alone. That night, when Julia had fallen into a deep sleep beside me, I reached for her phone. My hands trembled as I navigated through her messages, half hoping, half dreading what I might find. And there it was, messages from a man named Tom. They weren't just casual exchanges. They were intimate, full of love and longing. He called her his darling, and she responded in kind. The next day I confronted her. I didn't care that it was morning and we both had work. I held up her phone and demanded, "Who is Tom?" Her face went pale, and she tried to brush past me, but I blocked her path. "Tell me the truth, Julia." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I had fallen in love with. But then, she broke down and confessed. She had been having an affair with Tom for 6 years. Every time she said she was going to visit a friend or had a late meeting, she was with him. I felt like the ground had been pulled from under me. 6 years of lies, deceit, and betrayal. The pain was unbearable. The woman I loved more than anything had been living a double life, sharing her heart and body with another man. Our home, once a sanctuary of love and trust, now felt like a prison of broken promises. I wasn't satisfied with her tears and apologies. I needed answers. I found Tom's number in her phone and called him. To my surprise, he was candid. He knew she was married, and it didn't bother him. His indifference infuriated me even more. At first, I thought about leaving her and ending our marriage right then and there. But something inside me held back. Simply walking away felt too easy, too lenient for what she had done. Instead, I began to formulate a plan. If she could lie to me for 6 years, I could pretend to forgive her. I wanted her to feel the same pain, the same betrayal. I started by seeing a lawyer, gathering all the evidence I could of her infidelity. I made copies of every message, every letter. Then, I told Julia I forgave her, and that I wanted to make things work for the sake of our son. She believed me and moved back into our home, thinking we could mend our broken marriage. Little did she know, my mind was set on revenge. I invited Tom over for dinner, under the pretense of making peace. He accepted, thinking I genuinely wanted to talk. When he arrived, I played the recordings of their conversations and exposed every lie they had shared. Both of them were stunned, realizing they had been outplayed. Julia was devastated. She saw that I had used her trust against her. Tom faced serious consequences at work when I sent copies of their messages to his boss. And as for me, I filed for divorce and won, gaining custody of our son. As I walked away from that chapter of my life, I felt a strange sense of relief. It had been a long, painful journey, but I had regained control. My revenge was complete, and I was finally ready to move on, leaving the nightmare behind. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, much to my surprise. Perhaps it was the overwhelming evidence of Julia's infidelity, or maybe her guilt, that made her compliance unusually swift. Nevertheless, the finality of it all didn't bring the sense of closure I had expected. Instead, it left a hollow ache, a reminder of the years I'd spent living in a lie. In the days following the court's decision, I immersed myself in work. My job at the architectural firm provided a welcome distraction, allowing me to lose myself in blueprints and design meetings. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the memories of my marriage would creep back in during the quiet moments. One evening, as I was sorting through old photos and documents in preparation for moving to a new apartment, I stumbled upon a photo album. It was filled with pictures from our vacations, birthdays, and the birth of our son, Ethan. Each image was a snapshot of happier times, now tainted by the knowledge of Julia's betrayal. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the detritus of my past life, and felt a wave of anger and sorrow wash over me. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed the signs for so long? I needed answers, not just for myself, but for Ethan. He deserved to know the truth, to understand why his family was falling apart. The next day, I called Julia and asked to meet. She sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a small cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the ghosts of our shared past haunting us. When I arrived, she was already seated, nervously stirring her coffee. "Thanks for meeting me," I began, sitting down across from her. Julia looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and sadness. "Of course, Michael. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I need to understand, Julia. Why did you do it? Why Tom? And why for so long?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her secrets was finally crushing her. "I didn't plan for it to happen, Michael. It just did. Tom was someone I met through work. At first, it was just a friendship. We'd talk about our lives and our frustrations. He understood me in a way I felt you didn't anymore." Her words cut deep, but I kept my composure. "So, you decided to throw away our marriage for him?" "It wasn't like that," she protested. "I still loved you, but I felt like we had grown apart. You were always so busy with work, and I felt lonely. Tom was there for me when I needed someone." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been working hard to provide for our family, to ensure we had everything we needed while she found solace in another man's arms. "Why didn't you talk to me about how you were feeling?" "I tried," she said softly. "But you were always so focused on your projects. I felt like you weren't really listening." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "So instead of trying harder to fix what was broken, you chose to betray me for 6 years?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "You destroyed everything we had." We sat in silence for a few moments, the enormity of our failed marriage hanging heavy in the air. Finally, I broke the silence. "We need to figure out how to co-parent Ethan. He's the most important thing right now." Julia nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. He deserves better than this mess we've made." We spent the next hour discussing arrangements for Ethan, trying to create a plan that would provide him with stability and love, despite our fractured relationship. As we talked, I realized that while I might never fully forgive Julia, I needed to find a way to move forward for the sake of our son. Leaving the cafe, I felt a small sense of relief. It wasn't closure, but it was a step in the right direction. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten, and I was determined to make it better for Ethan and myself. As I drove home, I made a silent vow to rebuild my life from the ashes of my broken marriage. I had taken the first step by confronting Julia and beginning to unravel the tangled web of our past. Now, it was time to forge a new path, one where honesty, trust, and love could flourish once more. The apartment I moved into was modest but comfortable. It was a 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood, close to Ethan's school and my office. As I unpacked the last of the moving boxes, I looked around at my new surroundings. This was the start of a new chapter, one where I could rebuild my life from the ground up. Ethan's room was the first I set up. I wanted it to be a sanctuary for him, a place where he could feel safe and happy despite the changes in our lives. I hung up his favorite posters, set out his toys, and made sure his bed was covered in his favorite superhero-themed bedding. Seeing his face light up when he saw his new room was the first real moment of joy I'd felt in a long time. "Dad, this is awesome!" Ethan exclaimed, bouncing on his bed. "I'm glad you like it, buddy," I said, smiling at him. "This is your space. Make it your own." We spent the weekend settling in, exploring the neighborhood, and establishing new routines. I found a nearby park where Ethan and I could play soccer and a cozy diner that quickly became our favorite breakfast spot. It felt good to create new memories, ones untainted by the past. At work, I threw myself into my projects with renewed focus. My colleagues noticed the change in me, and I received more recognition for my efforts. It was gratifying to see my hard work paying off, but there was still a lingering emptiness that work alone couldn't fill. One evening, as I was picking Ethan up from school, I bumped into a woman named Laura, She was one of the parents I'd seen at school events, but had never really spoken to. Her son, Jack, was in the same grade as Ethan, and the boys had become fast friends. "Hi, Michael, right?" she said, extending her hand. "I'm Laura, Jack's mom." "Yes, nice to meet you, Laura," I replied, shaking her hand. We started talking, and I learned that she was also a single parent, having gone through a divorce a few years earlier. There was an immediate connection between us, a shared understanding of the challenges and rewards of raising a child alone. "Would you and Ethan like to join us for a playdate this weekend?" Laura asked. "The boys get along so well, and it would be nice to have some adult company." I agreed, and that Saturday we met at the park. While Ethan and Jack played, Laura and I sat on a bench and talked. It was refreshing to open up to someone who understood what I was going through. Laura shared her own experiences and offered advice on navigating co-parenting and finding balance. As the weeks went by, Laura and I grew closer. We started meeting regularly, sometimes with the kids and sometimes just the two of us. It wasn't long before I realized that my feelings for her were growing stronger. She was kind and understanding, and brought a sense of calm to my life that I hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a particularly fun day at the beach with the boys, Laura and I sat on the porch of her house watching the sunset. The air was filled with the sound of laughter as Ethan and Jack played in the yard. "Thank you for today," I said, turning to her. "I haven't felt this happy in a long time." Laura smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Michael. We both do." At that moment, I knew I wanted to take the next step. "Laura, I know we've both been through a lot, and I don't want to rush things, but I really care about you. I'd like to see where this goes if you're open to it." She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I feel the same way, Michael. Let's take it one day at a time." Our relationship blossomed from that point on. We supported each other through the ups and downs, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't always easy, but having Laura by my side made everything more manageable. Julia and I continued to navigate the complexities of co-parenting. While our relationship remained strained, we both prioritized Ethan's well-being. There were difficult moments, but over time, we found a way to communicate effectively for the sake of our son. Life was far from perfect, but it was moving in the right direction. The pain of the past was still there, but it was slowly being overshadowed by the promise of a brighter future. With Laura's love and support, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination to build a life filled with trust, honesty, and happiness. As I tucked Ethan into bed one night, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, Ethan, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be great." And in that moment, I knew it was true. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. Laura and I grew closer, and our children thrived in the stability we provided. It was a delicate balance, managing our budding relationship while keeping Ethan's needs at the forefront. Laura's calm presence and shared experiences made everything feel possible. One afternoon, while at the park with Ethan, my phone buzzed with a message from Julia. She asked if we could talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. We decided to meet at the same cafe where we had confronted the reality of our failed marriage. Julia was already seated when I arrived, a cup of coffee untouched before her. She looked up as I approached, a mixture of hope and anxiety in her eyes. "Hi, Michael," she said softly. "Hi, Julia, what's up?" I tried to keep my tone neutral, not wanting to reopen old wounds. "I wanted to talk about Ethan," she began. "I've been thinking a lot about how we're handling things, and I think we need to make some changes." My guard went up immediately. "What kind of changes?" She took a deep breath. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. One thing that keeps coming up is how important it is for Ethan to see us working together, not just as parents, but as a team." I nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but willing to listen. "What do you suggest?" "I think we need to have more open communication, not just about schedules and logistics, but about how we're raising Ethan. He needs to see that we're on the same page, even if we're not together anymore." I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. It was a reasonable request, and one that could benefit Ethan in the long run. "I agree, but how do we make that happen?" Julia smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "I've been reading about co-parenting strategies. Maybe we could try some of them. Regular meetings, shared calendars, discussing major decisions together. Okay, I said, feeling a cautious optimism. Let's give it a try. For Ethan. Our first co-parenting meeting was awkward. We sat at the kitchen table in Julia's house, discussing school activities, doctor's appointments, and summer plans. It was strange to be in a space that once felt like home, now filled with the echoes of our past. But as we worked through the details, the tension began to ease. We were doing this for Ethan, and that was all that mattered. Over the next few months, our efforts paid off. Ethan seemed happier and more relaxed. He thrived in school and enjoyed the time he spent with both of us. And as Julia and I learned to navigate our new dynamic, a sense of mutual respect began to form. Meanwhile, my relationship with Laura deepened. She was my anchor, a steady presence in the midst of change. We continued to support each other, finding joy in the simple moments, cooking dinner together, watching movies with the kids, and sharing quiet conversations late into the night. One evening, Laura and I sat on her porch, sipping wine and watching the stars. The night was calm, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant laughter from the boys playing inside. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about the future." Laura turned to me, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "What about it?" "I know it's been a whirlwind, everything that's happened, but I've never been more certain about anything in my life. I love you, Laura. I want to build a future with you if you feel the same way." She smiled, her hand finding mine. "I love you too, Michael, and I do want a future with you, but we need to take it slow for our kids' sake. They've been through a lot." "I know," I agreed, "and we will. But knowing we're on the same page means everything to me." As our relationship continued to flourish, so did our blended family. Ethan and Jack became inseparable, their laughter a constant reminder of the resilience of children. The more time we spent together, the more it felt like we were creating something special, something lasting. The holidays approached, bringing with them the inevitable complications of shared custody. Julia and I navigated the arrangements with newfound cooperation. For the first time in years, there was no tension, no resentment. We managed to celebrate Thanksgiving together, a tentative step towards a new kind of family. On Christmas Eve, Laura and I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. We decorated a tree, baked cookies, and watched holiday movies with the boys. It was simple, but it felt perfect. As the evening drew to a close, I looked around at the people I loved and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Here's to new beginnings," I said, raising a glass. "To new beginnings," Laura echoed, clinking her glass with mine. As I held her close, I knew that while the journey had been painful, it had also led me to a place of hope and possibility. We had navigated the storms of our past, and were now steering towards a brighter future, together. The new year brought with it a fresh set of challenges and opportunities. Balancing work, co-parenting, and my relationship with Laura demanded a level of organization and patience I'd never known I possessed. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of pure joy that made everything worthwhile. One of the biggest challenges we faced was integrating our lives further. Laura and I were committed to each other, but blending our families required delicate handling. We had to ensure that Ethan and Jack felt secure and loved, despite the changes swirling around them. One Saturday morning, Laura and I decided to take the boys on a camping trip. It was a chance to bond away from the distractions of daily life. We packed up the car with tents, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to feed an army, and set off for a nearby state park. The boys were thrilled, their excitement infectious. As we hiked to our campsite, their laughter echoed through the trees. We set up our tents, built a fire, and spent the afternoon exploring the trails and catching glimpses of wildlife. That evening, as we sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think we could do this every year?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "I think that's a great idea, buddy. What do you think, Laura?" Laura, sitting beside me with Jack on her lap, nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. This could be our new tradition." The boys cheered, and at that moment, I felt a deep sense of contentment. We were creating new memories and new traditions, and it felt right. As the night grew darker and the stars filled the sky, Ethan and Jack fell asleep in their tents. Laura and I sat by the dying embers of the fire, wrapped in a blanket, enjoying the peaceful silence. This was a good idea, Laura said, leaning her head on my shoulder. I think the boys needed this. We all did. I agree, I said, kissing the top of her head. It's moments like these that remind me how lucky we are. We stayed up late, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but we were ready to face them together. The next morning, we packed up and headed home, our hearts full and our bond stronger than ever. Back in the real world, we returned to our routines, but the camping trip had brought us closer. Laura and I continued to navigate the complexities of our blended family, finding ways to support each other and our children. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received a call from Ethan's teacher. She wanted to discuss his recent behavior in class. Concerned, I arranged a meeting for the following day. At the school, Mrs. Thompson, Ethan's teacher, greeted me with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Adams. I wanted to talk to you about some changes I've noticed in Ethan's behavior." My heart sank. What kind of changes? He's been more withdrawn lately, not participating as much in class. I'm concerned he might be struggling with something. I nodded, my mind racing. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll talk to him and see if we can figure out what's going on." That evening, I sat down with Ethan in his room. "Hey, buddy, Mrs. Thompson told me you've been a bit quiet in class lately. Is everything okay?" Ethan shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know, Dad. Sometimes I just feel sad." My heart ached for him. "It's okay to feel sad, Ethan. Can you tell me what's making you feel this way?" He hesitated, then finally spoke. "I miss how things used to be, before the divorce, before everything changed." I pulled him into a hug. "I understand, buddy. Change is hard, but I want you to know that it's okay to talk about your feelings. Laura and I are here for you, and so is your mom. We all love you very much." Ethan nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know, Dad. It's just, sometimes I wish things could go back to how they were." "I know, Ethan," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "But remember, we're making new memories now too, and you've got a lot of people who care about you." We talked for a while longer, and I assured him that it was okay to feel sad and that he wasn't alone. It was a difficult conversation, but an important one. The following weeks were challenging as we worked to support Ethan through his feelings. Julia and I communicated more frequently, ensuring we were on the same page and providing a united front for our son. Meanwhile, Laura and I continued to strengthen our relationship. We found time for ourselves, going on dates and enjoying each other's company. Our love grew deeper, and the future seemed bright. One evening, as Laura and I sat on the porch of her house watching the sunset, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Michael, I've been thinking about something," she said, her voice tentative. "What is it?" I asked, curious. "I know we've talked about taking things slow, but I can't help thinking about the future, about us and the boys. I want us to be a family, officially." Her words took my breath away. I had been thinking the same thing, but hearing her say it filled me with a mixture of joy and excitement. "I want that too, Laura," I said, taking her hand. "I want us to be a family." As we sat there, dreaming about the future, I knew that despite the challenges, we were on the right path. We were building something beautiful, something lasting, and I was ready for whatever came next, as long as I had Laura by my side. The decision to become an official family marked a new chapter in our lives. Laura and I began the process of finding a place where we could all live together. The search for a new home was exciting and filled with possibilities for our future. We spent weekends visiting open houses, exploring different neighborhoods, and imagining what our lives could be like in each potential home. Ethan and Jack joined us on some of these trips, their enthusiasm contagious as they ran through empty rooms, picturing where their toys and posters would go. One Saturday, we found it, a beautiful house with a spacious backyard, plenty of rooms, and a welcoming atmosphere. It felt right as if it were waiting for us. We made an offer, and a few weeks later, it was ours. The move was a monumental task. Laura and I coordinated schedules, packed up our respective homes, and organized the logistics of blending our households. It was chaotic, but the excitement of starting fresh in a new space kept us motivated. The day we moved in was filled with laughter and the sound of footsteps echoing through empty rooms. We set up the boys' rooms first, making sure they felt at home. Ethan chose a space-themed decor, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, while Jack went for a jungle theme, with bright green walls and animal decals. As the sun set on our first day in the new house, Laura and I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes. We shared a look that spoke volumes. We were exhausted, but incredibly happy. "This is it," I said, wrapping my arms around her. "Our new beginning." Laura smiled, resting her head on my chest. "I can't believe we did it. We're really here." Over the next few weeks, we settled into our new routine. The boys adjusted well, their laughter filling the house as they explored their new home and backyard. We hosted a housewarming party, inviting friends and family to celebrate this milestone with us. Julia attended the party, and to my surprise, she brought Tom. It was an unexpected but necessary step towards healing and moving forward. We exchanged polite greetings, and though the tension was palpable, it was a sign of progress. Life in our new home was everything I had hoped for and more. Laura and I took turns cooking dinner, often involving the boys in meal prep. We spent weekends gardening, playing games, and hosting barbecues. The house felt alive with love and laughter. One evening, after putting the boys to bed, Laura and I sat on the porch, enjoying the cool night air. The stars were bright, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. "Michael," Laura said, her voice soft, "I've been thinking about something important." "What is it?" I asked, curious. She took a deep breath. "I know we've talked about becoming an official family, but there's one more step I think we should take." I looked at her, my heart pounding. "Go on." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, she revealed a simple but beautiful ring. "I want us to get married, Michael. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I took the ring from her hand. "Laura, you've made me so happy. I've wanted to ask you the same thing, but I was waiting for the right moment. I love you more than words can express, and I want to marry you too." We hugged tightly, tears of joy streaming down our faces. It was a perfect moment, one that solidified our commitment to each other and to our family. We decided to have a small, intimate wedding in our backyard. The boys were excited to be a part of the ceremony, helping with decorations and even practicing their roles as ring bearers. Our friends and family gathered to celebrate with us, filling our home with love and support. On the day of the wedding, the backyard was transformed into a magical setting. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, flowers adorned every surface, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. As I stood at the makeshift altar waiting for Laura, my heart swelled with anticipation. When Laura appeared, walking down the aisle with Ethan and Jack by her side, she took my breath away. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the entire yard. As she reached me, we took each other's hands, our boys standing proudly beside us. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. We exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring. The boys handed us the rings, their faces beaming with pride. As we placed the rings on each other's fingers, I felt a profound sense of joy and fulfillment. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said, and I did, sealing our commitment with a kiss that was met with cheers and applause. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, dancing, and delicious food. We toasted to our future, surrounded by the people we loved most. As the night drew to a close, Laura and I stood hand in hand, watching the boys play with their friends, the stars twinkling above us. "We did it," Laura said, her eyes shining with happiness. "We're a family." "Yes, we are," I replied, pulling her close. "And I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." Our journey had been filled with challenges, but we had faced them together and emerged stronger. As I looked around at our home, our friends, and our family, I knew that we had built something beautiful. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the love, resilience, and hope that had brought us to this place. We were ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that we had each other and a future filled with endless possibilities. Life after the wedding felt like a dream. We had found a rhythm that worked for us, balancing work, parenting, and our relationship with ease. Our blended family was thriving, and the house felt more like home with each passing day. But as often happens, life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed with a call from Julia. It was unusual for her to call this early, and a knot of worry formed in my stomach as I answered. "Michael, it's Ethan. He's not feeling well," Julia said, her voice filled with concern. "He has a high fever, and he's been complaining of stomach pain." "I'll be right over," I said, grabbing my keys and heading out the door. When I arrived at Julia's house, Ethan looked pale and weak, lying on the couch with a cold compress on his forehead. I sat beside him, my heart aching at the sight of him so unwell. "Hey, buddy, how are you feeling?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "It hurts, Dad," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get him to the hospital," I said to Julia, who nodded in agreement. The drive to the hospital felt interminable. Julia and I sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts of fear and worry. When we arrived, the doctors took Ethan in for tests, leaving us in the waiting room to anxiously await news. Hours passed, each one more agonizing than the last. Finally, a doctor came out to speak with us. His expression was serious and my heart sank. "We've run some tests and it appears that Ethan has appendicitis. We need to perform surgery to remove his appendix immediately," he explained. I felt a rush of fear, but I nodded, knowing this was the best course of action. "Do whatever you need to do to make him better." Julia and I sat in the waiting room, holding each other's hands for support. The surgery took a few hours, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, the doctor returned with a reassuring smile. "The surgery went well. Ethan is in recovery now and he's doing fine. You can see him shortly." Relief washed over me and I hugged Julia tightly. Thank God. We were allowed to see Ethan once he was settled in his room. He looked tired but relieved, a small smile forming on his lips when he saw us. "Hi, buddy. You did great," I said, brushing his hair back. "Thanks, Dad. I'm glad it's over," he said weakly. Julia and I took turns staying by Ethan's side until he was ready to go home. Laura visited the hospital too, bringing Jack along to cheer Ethan up. Seeing the boys together, despite the circumstances, warmed my heart. Our family was there for each other, no matter what. Ethan's recovery was slow but steady. Laura and I made sure to give him all the support he needed, both physically and emotionally. We also took the opportunity to talk to Jack about what had happened, reassuring him that Ethan would be okay. Meanwhile, life outside the hospital continued. Work demanded my attention, and Laura faced her own challenges at her job. We leaned on each other, finding strength in our partnership. But as we navigated these difficulties, I began to notice subtle changes in Laura. One evening, after a long day of work and taking care of Ethan, I found Laura sitting alone in our bedroom, staring out the window. Her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced with a look of deep contemplation. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, sitting down beside her. She sighed, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. Between work, the kids, and everything else, it's a lot to handle." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. "I know it's been tough, but we're in this together. Is there anything specific that's bothering you?" Laura hesitated before speaking. "It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough. For you, for the kids, for myself. It's hard to balance everything." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're doing an amazing job, Laura. We all have moments when we doubt ourselves, but you're a fantastic mother and partner. We'll get through this, just like we've gotten through everything else." She smiled weakly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Michael. I needed to hear that." As the weeks went by, we continued to adjust to our new normal. Ethan's health improved, and he returned to his usual energetic self. Laura and I made a conscious effort to support each other more, ensuring we both had time to recharge. One weekend, we decided to take a short family trip to the beach. It was a chance to relax and reconnect, away from the stresses of daily life. The boys were ecstatic, and their excitement was contagious. The beach was beautiful, the waves crashing against the shore as the sun set in the distance. We built sandcastles, played in the surf, and enjoyed picnics on the sand. It was a perfect escape, a reminder of the simple joys in life. One evening, as we watched the sunset together, Laura turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Michael, I've been thinking about what you said, about us being a team, and I want to thank you for always being there for me, for us." I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "We're stronger together, Laura, and I wouldn't have it any other way." As we stood there watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. We had faced so many challenges, but we had done it together. And no matter what the future holds, I knew we would continue to navigate it with love and resilience. Our journey was far from over, but with Laura by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. We were building a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. And as I looked at our children playing in the sand, I knew that our future was bright. Life had settled into a comforting routine. The boys were thriving, Laura and I were stronger than ever, and our new home felt like a sanctuary. But as we moved forward, shadows of the past began to creep in, reminding me that not everything could be left behind so easily. One evening, as I was sorting through some old boxes in the garage, I came across a stack of photos from my life with Julia. Nostalgia hit me hard as I sifted through images of happier times. Our wedding day, Ethan as a baby, family vacations, moments that seemed like a lifetime ago. Just as I was about to put the photos away, Laura walked in. She noticed the look on my face and sat down beside me. "Are those from when you and Julia were together?" she asked gently. "Yeah," I said, handing her a few pictures. "It's strange looking back at these. It feels like a different life." Laura studied the photos for a moment before turning to me. "Do you miss it? Your life with her?" I took a deep breath, considering my answer. I miss certain moments, but not the way things ended. I'm grateful for those times because they gave me Ethan. But what we have now is different. It's better, stronger. She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you feel that way. I know blending our families hasn't always been easy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past mixing with the promise of the future. Eventually, we decided to put the photos away and focus on the present, but the encounter left a lingering sense of unresolved emotions. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from Tom. He suggested we meet to talk about some concerns he had. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop. When I arrived, Tom was already there, looking more serious than usual. We exchanged pleasantries, but the tension between us was palpable. "Thanks for meeting me, Michael," Tom began, sipping his coffee. "I wanted to talk to you about Ethan." "What about him?" I asked, my concern growing. Tom took a deep breath. "I've noticed that he's been struggling more lately. Julia mentioned he's been acting out at her place, and I've seen it too. I think the changes have been hard on him, and I wanted to see if there's something we can do together to help." Hearing this from Tom took me by surprise. Despite our differences, it was clear he genuinely cared about Ethan. I nodded, appreciating his concern. "I've noticed it too," I admitted. "He's been more withdrawn and less interested in things he used to enjoy. Laura and I have been trying to support him, but maybe we need to do more." Tom leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I think it would help if we all sat down together, you, me, Julia, and Laura, and talked about how we can make things easier for him. Consistency is key, and if we're all on the same page, it might help him adjust." It was a reasonable suggestion, and I agreed. "Let's set up a time to meet. I'll talk to Laura and Julia, and we'll figure something out." We finalized the details and parted ways, the conversation leaving me with a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, I discussed the meeting with Laura, who agreed it was a good idea. A week later, the four of us gathered at our home. It was an awkward start, but we quickly got to the heart of the matter: Ethan's well-being. We shared our observations, concerns, and ideas on how to support him better. Julia spoke up, her voice tinged with worry. "I think part of the problem is that Ethan doesn't feel like he has a stable environment. He's constantly moving between two homes, and that's hard for any child." Laura nodded in agreement. "Maybe we need to create more consistency in his schedule. Make sure he knows what to expect and when." Tom added, "And we should all be communicating more. If something's going on with him at one house, the other should know about it. That way, we can address any issues together." As we talked, I realized how much we all cared about Ethan and wanted the best for him. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan in place to create a more stable and supportive environment for him. The changes took time to implement, but slowly, we began to see improvements. Ethan seemed more relaxed, his mood lightening as he adjusted to the new routines. We made sure he had special one-on-one time with each of us, reinforcing that he was loved and valued. Despite the progress, there were still moments when the past cast long shadows. One evening, as Laura and I were getting ready for bed, she turned to me with a worried expression. "Michael, do you ever think about what might happen if Julia wanted to get back together with you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The question caught me off guard, but I understood her fear. "No, Laura. What Julia and I had is over. We've both moved on, and I'm committed to you and our family. I love you, and I wouldn't trade what we have for anything." She sighed, relief washing over her face. "I know, but sometimes I can't help but worry. I just needed to hear you say it." I pulled her into a hug, kissing the top of her head. "You have nothing to worry about. We're building a future together, and that's all that matters." As the weeks turned into months, the changes we implemented for Ethan's sake continued to pay off. He was happier and more engaged, and his bond with Jack grew stronger. Laura and I focused on nurturing our relationship and finding time for ourselves amidst the chaos of daily life. One evening, while the boys were at a sleepover, Laura and I decided to have a quiet dinner at home. We cooked together, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. As we sat down to eat, Laura raised her glass, a mischievous glint in her eye. "To us," she said, smiling, "and to face whatever comes our way." "To us," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers, "and to a future filled with love and laughter." At that moment, I realized that while the shadows of the past might always be there, they couldn't dim the light of the life we were building together. Our journey had its challenges, but with Laura by my side, I knew we could face anything. And as I looked into her eyes filled with love and hope, I knew that our story was just beginning. Life had settled into a comforting rhythm, but as it often happens, just when you think everything is perfect, reality has a way of throwing unexpected challenges your way. Despite the progress we had made as a blended family, there were undercurrents of tension that I could no longer ignore. One afternoon, I came home early from work to find Laura sitting on the porch, her face drawn and pale. She was holding her phone tightly, her knuckles white. "Laura, what's wrong?" I asked, hurrying to her side. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "I just got off the phone with my mother. She's been diagnosed with early-stage dementia." The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Laura's mother, Mary, had always been a vibrant, independent woman. The thought of her struggling with such a debilitating condition was heartbreaking. "I'm so sorry, Laura," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We'll get through this together." Laura nodded, but I could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. Over the next few days, we discussed how we could best support Mary. We decided to bring her to live with us, ensuring she had the care and support she needed. The adjustment was difficult for everyone. Mary's condition brought a new set of challenges, and our once peaceful home was now filled with tension and stress. Laura bore the brunt of the caregiving, and it took a toll on her. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Laura and I found ourselves arguing in the kitchen. "You're not the only one dealing with stress, Michael," Laura snapped, her voice tinged with exhaustion and frustration. "I'm doing everything I can to keep this family together, and it feels like you're not even trying to help." Her words stung, and I felt a wave of guilt. I'd been so focused on work and managing the boys that I hadn't realized how much Laura was struggling. "I'm sorry, Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I know I haven't been as present as I should be. Let's figure out a way to manage this together." Laura sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I'm just so tired, Michael. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to ask for help." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll figure this out. We're a team, remember? Let's sit down and make a plan." We spent the next few hours discussing how we could better manage our responsibilities. We agreed to hire a part-time caregiver for Mary, giving Laura some much-needed respite. I also promised to be more involved at home, ensuring that Laura didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The changes helped, but the strain was still there. One day, while going through some old documents, I stumbled upon something that stopped me cold. Hidden among Mary's medical papers was a letter addressed to Laura from someone named David. Curiosity piqued, I opened the letter. It was dated 6 years ago and was filled with affectionate language, hinting at a deep, personal relationship. My heart pounded as I read the words, realizing that Laura had kept this part of her past hidden from me. Confronting her about the letter was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. That evening, after the boys were in bed, I showed her the letter. Laura, who is David? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of hurt and anger. She looked at the letter, her face paling. Michael, I can explain. David was someone I dated before we met. We were serious, but it ended badly. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it mattered anymore. But it does matter, Laura. Why didn't you tell me about him? Why keep it a secret? Tears filled her eyes as she reached for my hand. I was afraid, Michael. Afraid that you'd think less of me, or that it would somehow affect our relationship. I love you, and I didn't want anything to come between us. I took a deep breath, trying to process her words. Laura, I understand that we all have pasts, but secrets like this can damage the trust we've built. We need to be honest with each other, no matter how difficult it might be. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you. I'll tell you everything. I promise. We spent the rest of the night talking, Laura revealing details about her past relationship with David. It was painful, but it brought us closer, reinforcing our commitment to transparency and trust. As we moved forward, the challenges continued, but we faced them together. Mary's condition worsened, requiring more care and attention. The boys had their own struggles, dealing with school, friends, and the complexities of growing up in a blended family. Through it all, Laura and I leaned on each other, finding strength in our love and determination to build a better future. We made time for each other, going on dates, sharing quiet moments, and reaffirming our commitment to our family. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Laura turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Michael, I've been thinking about something important, she said, her voice steady. What is it? I asked, curious. I want us to renew our vows, she said, her eyes filled with sincerity. We've been through so much, and I think it's important to reaffirm our commitment to each other and to our family. Tears welled up in my eyes as I took her hand. I'd love that, Laura. Let's do it. We began planning a small, intimate ceremony, inviting our closest friends and family. The boys were excited, helping us with the preparations and looking forward to the celebration. The day of the vow renewal arrived, and the backyard was transformed into a beautiful, serene setting. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees and flowers adorned every surface. As I stood at the makeshift altar, waiting for Laura, my heart swelled with love and gratitude. When Laura appeared, walking down the aisle with Ethan and Jack by her side, she looked radiant. As she reached me, we took each other's hands, our boys standing proudly beside us. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. We exchanged vows, promising to continue facing life's challenges together, with love and trust. The boys handed us the rings, their faces beaming with pride. As we placed the rings on each other's fingers, I felt a profound sense of joy and fulfillment. You may kiss the bride, the officiant said, and I did, sealing our renewed commitment with a kiss that was met with cheers and applause. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, dancing, and delicious food. We toasted to our future, surrounded by the people we loved most. As the night drew to a close, Laura and I stood hand in hand, watching the boys play with their friends, the stars twinkling above us. We did it, Laura said, her eyes shining with happiness. We're a family. Yes, we are, I replied, pulling her close. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for us. Our journey had been filled with challenges, but we had faced them together and emerged stronger. As I looked around at our home, our friends, and our family, I knew that we had built something beautiful. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the love, resilience, and hope that had brought us to this place. We were ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that we had each other and a future filled with endless possibilities. Life after our vow renewal felt like a fresh start. Our family had grown closer, and the ceremony had reaffirmed our commitment to each other. But as much as we tried to focus on the future, the shadows of the past were not so easily dispelled. One crisp autumn evening, while Laura and I were preparing dinner, Ethan came into the kitchen with a troubled expression. He handed me his phone, showing a series of messages from one of his classmates. "Dad, can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, buddy," I said, setting down the knife and wiping my hands on a towel. "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Laura before speaking. "There's this kid at school. He's been saying some really mean things about our family." I felt a surge of protectiveness. What kind of things, Ethan? Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes filling with tears. He said that you and Mom only got married because you had to, and that our family is fake. He even brought up stuff about your past with Julia and other things. Laura put her hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Kids can be cruel, and it's not fair. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. We'll talk to the school and make sure this gets addressed. But Ethan, you need to know that none of what he said is true. We love you and Jack more than anything, and our family is real and strong. Ethan nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. As he walked away, I turned to Laura. We need to get to the bottom of this. How did this kid find out about our past? Laura looked worried. I don't know, but we need to find out. We can't let this tear us apart. The next day, Laura and I met with the school principal to discuss the situation. He assured us that they would investigate and take appropriate action. But as the days passed, the tension in our home grew. Ethan was quieter and more withdrawn, and Jack seemed to be picking up on the unease. One evening, after the boys were in bed, Laura and I sat down to talk. Michael, do you think there's more to this? Could someone be deliberately trying to hurt us? The thought had crossed my mind, but I didn't want to believe it. I hope not, but we can't rule it out. We need to be vigilant and support each other. A few days later, I received a call from Julia. She sounded upset. Michael, we need to talk. It's about Ethan. My heart sank. What's going on, Julia? She hesitated before speaking. Ethan told me about what's been happening at school, but there's something else. He found an old photo album in my closet with pictures from our time together. He's been asking a lot of questions about why we split up. The photo album. It was a relic from a life I had tried to move past. What did you tell him? I told him the truth as gently as I could, Julia said, but I think he's struggling to understand. Maybe it's time we all sat down and had an honest conversation with him. I agreed, though the prospect of reopening old wounds was daunting. That weekend, Julia came over, and the four of us sat down in the living room. Ethan looked nervous, clutching the photo album. Ethan, I began, taking a deep breath. I know you have questions about the past, about why your mom and I aren't together anymore. He nodded, looking up at me with wide eyes. Why did you and Mom split up, Dad? I glanced at Julia, who gave me an encouraging nod. Your mom and I loved each other very much, but sometimes things don't work out the way you hope. We had our differences and we made mistakes. But the most important thing you need to know is that we both love you more than anything. Julia took Ethan's hand. That's right, sweetheart. Our split wasn't your fault, and it doesn't change how much we care about you. Ethan seemed to absorb our words, but I could tell he was still processing everything. So, you and Laura, you're happy now? I smiled, looking over at Laura, who was sitting beside Jack. Yes, Ethan. Laura and I are very happy. We've built a new life together, and we're all part of one big family. Ethan seemed to relax a little, though I knew it would take time for him to fully understand and accept everything. The conversation was a step in the right direction, but the road ahead was still uncertain. In the following weeks, we focused on supporting Ethan, giving him the space to talk about his feelings. The school addressed the bullying issue, and the mean-spirited remarks ceased. However, the impact lingered, and I could see it in the way Ethan interacted with us, cautious, guarded, as if he were waiting for the next shoe to drop. Amidst all this, Laura and I faced our own challenges. The strain of caregiving for Mary, managing our jobs, and supporting the boys left us with little time for each other. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, we found ourselves arguing again. Michael, I feel like we're just going through the motions, Laura said, her voice breaking. I miss us. I miss the connection we had. I reached out to take her hand. I know, Laura, I miss it too. We need to find a way to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. We decided to make a conscious effort to carve out time for ourselves. We arranged for Mary's caregiver to stay a little longer, giving us evenings to spend together. We planned date nights, took long walks, and made a point to talk, really talk, about our dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Slowly, we began to rebuild our connection. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Laura turned to me with a soft smile. Do you remember the first time we met? She asked, her eyes twinkling. I chuckled. Of course I do. You were standing in the park watching the boys play soccer. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She laughed, a sound that warmed my heart. And I thought you were a wonderful father. It was your kindness and patience with the boys that drew me to you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. We've been through so much, Laura, but I believe in us. I believe we can overcome anything. Laura leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. I believe that too, Michael. As long as we have each other, we can face whatever comes our way. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Ethan stood in the doorway, looking hesitant. Can I join you guys? He asked softly. Of course, buddy, I said, patting the spot next to me. Ethan sat down and Laura wrapped an arm around him. How are you feeling? She asked. He shrugged. Better, I guess. It's just a lot to take in. I know it is, I said, pulling him close. But we're here for you no matter what. We'll get through this together. Ethan nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a hint of a smile on his face. As we sat by the fire, our family slowly mending, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead was still filled with challenges, but with love, honesty, and resilience. I knew we could face them together. Our family had been through the fire, and we had emerged stronger. And as I looked at Laura and Ethan, I knew that no matter what, we would continue to build a future filled with love and endless possibilities. For a while, things seemed to settle down. The bullying at school had stopped, Ethan was starting to open up more, and Laura and I had rekindled our connection. Even Mary's condition had stabilized somewhat, thanks to the extra help we'd hired. But as life often does, just when you think you've found your footing, it throws you off balance again. One evening, as Laura and I were cleaning up after dinner, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face immediately went pale. Who is it? I asked, concerned. It's nothing, she said quickly, shoving the phone into her pocket. But I knew her well enough to know when she was hiding something. Laura, what's going on? I pressed, my anxiety growing. She sighed, avoiding my gaze. It's just someone from my past. It's not important. The way she said it made it clear that it was indeed important. My mind raced, filled with worry and suspicion. Is it David? She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise. How did you mentioned him before, remember? Is he trying to contact you again? Laura hesitated, then nodded. He found me on social media. He sent me a message wanting to reconnect. A mix of anger and fear surged through me. And what did you say? I haven't responded, she said quickly. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hide it from you, but I also didn't want to cause any more problems. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Laura, we need to be honest with each other. If he's reaching out, we have to deal with it together. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Michael. I don't want anything to come between us. We'll figure it out, I said, pulling her into a hug. But we need to be open about it. No more secrets. That night, we discussed how to handle the situation with David. Laura agreed to block him on social media and cut off any potential contact. It was a difficult conversation, but I felt relieved knowing that we were facing it together. However, the peace was short-lived. A few days later, while I was at work, I received a call from an unknown number. Curious, I answered, only to hear a voice I hadn't heard in years. Hello, Michael, the voice said, smooth and familiar. It's David. My heart raced and I felt a surge of anger. What do you want, David? I think we need to talk, he said calmly. There are things you don't know, things Laura hasn't told you. I clenched my fist, trying to keep my composure. Whatever you have to say, you can say it to both of us. I'm not interested in playing games. Very well, he replied. I'll be in town this weekend. Let's meet. You, me, and Laura. We can clear the air. I didn't like the idea of meeting him, but I also didn't want any more secrets. Fine, but if you try to cause any trouble, I won't hesitate to take action. Understood, he said, and the call ended. That evening I told Laura about the call. She was visibly shaken but agreed that meeting David might be the best way to put everything behind us. The weekend arrived, and we arranged to meet David at a local coffee shop. As we entered, I spotted him sitting at a corner table, looking as suave and confident as ever. Laura's grip on my hand tightened as we approached. Michael, Laura, David said, standing up and extending his hand. I ignored it, and Laura did the same. Let's get this over with, I said, sitting down. David sighed, sitting back down as well. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I just think there are things that need to be said. Then say them, Laura said, her voice trembling. He looked at her, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Laura, I know you've moved on, but there are things about our past that Michael deserves to know. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What are you talking about? David leaned forward, his expression serious. Laura and I didn't just have a fling. We were engaged. We had planned a future together, but things fell apart. She never told you about our engagement, did she? I looked at Laura, who was staring at the table, tears streaming down her face. Is it true, Laura? She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, it's true. We were engaged, but it ended badly. I didn't tell you because I was afraid it would change the way you see me. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? I was scared, she said, looking up at me with pleading eyes. I love you, Michael. I didn't want my past to ruin what we have. David sighed, standing up. I didn't come here to hurt you, Michael. I just thought you deserved to know the whole truth. I'll leave now. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive her. He walked away, leaving Laura and me sitting in stunned silence. I didn't know what to say, or how to process the revelation that the woman I loved had kept such a significant part of her past hidden from me. Finally, I looked at Laura, who was still crying. Why, Laura? Why didn't you tell me? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, too hurt to be touched. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. I stood up, needing space to think. I need some time, Laura. I need to figure out how to process all of this. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. Just know that I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I walked out of the coffee shop, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The calm we had worked so hard to build had been shattered, and I didn't know if we could ever piece it back together. But one thing was clear. Our future depended on facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt like I was in a daze. The revelation about Laura's past engagement to David was a sucker punch I hadn't seen coming. The cold evening air did little to clear my mind as I wandered aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench, staring at the autumn leaves falling around me. Memories of Laura and me, our boys, and the life we'd built together played through my mind, tainted now by the knowledge of what she'd kept from me. My phone buzzed with a message from Laura. *, Michael, please come home. We need to talk. *. I took a deep breath and decided to head back, though I wasn't sure what I'd say or how I'd react. The walk home felt endless, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal and confusion. When I walked through the door, Laura was waiting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She stood up as I entered, her face a mixture of hope and fear. Michael, she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. Laura, I need to understand why, I said, my voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me about your engagement to David? She took a shaky breath, tears welling up again. I was ashamed, Michael. It was a part of my life that ended so badly, and I thought that by keeping it from you, I could start fresh. I didn't want it to affect us. But it has affected us, Laura, I said, my frustration evident. Keeping secrets, no matter how painful, only makes things worse. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I realize that now. I was wrong and I'm so sorry. I love you and I never wanted to hurt you. I sat down, feeling the exhaustion of the emotional turmoil. This isn't just about your past, Laura. It's about trust. How can I trust you when you've hidden something so significant from me? Laura knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. Please, Michael. I will do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. I don't want to lose you. I looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and desperation there. I wanted to forgive her, to move past this, but the hurt was still too raw. It's going to take time, Laura. I need time to process this and figure out where we go from here. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just please don't give up on us. As we sat there in silence, The weight of the evening's revelations hung heavy between us. The trust we'd built had been shaken, but not irreparably broken. It would take effort and honesty to rebuild, but for the sake of our family, I was willing to try. The days that followed were tense and awkward. Laura and I spoke only when necessary, the silence between us filled with unspoken questions and unresolved pain. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine and the distraction it provided. One evening, while I was working late in my home office, Ethan knocked on the door. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course, buddy," I said, motioning for him to come in. He sat down across from me, looking nervous. "Is everything okay between you and Mom? You've been acting different lately." I sighed, struggling to find the right words. "Ethan, sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work through, but I promise you, we're doing our best to figure things out." He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I just don't want us to fall apart. I love our family." My heart ached at his words, and I walked over to him, kneeling down to his level. "We love you too, Ethan. No matter what happens, your mom and I will always be here for you and Jack. We're going to do everything we can to keep our family together." He nodded, looking a little reassured. "Okay, Dad, I trust you." His words were a stark reminder of the importance of trust and honesty. As he left the room, I resolved to do whatever it took to rebuild the trust between Laura and me. That weekend, I suggested to Laura that we go to marriage counseling. She agreed immediately, eager to do anything to mend our relationship. Our first session was emotional, with both of us laying bare our fears, frustrations, and hopes for the future. The counselor helped us navigate the complex emotions, offering guidance and support. Through the sessions, Laura and I began to understand each other better, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. But the process wasn't easy. There were days when the pain and anger resurfaced, and it felt like we were back at square one. Yet each time we chose to keep pushing forward, committed to healing and moving past the betrayal. As the weeks turned into months, the tension in our home gradually eased. Ethan and Jack noticed the change, their smiles returning as the atmosphere lightened. Laura and I made a conscious effort to communicate openly, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Laura took my hand. "Thank you, Michael. Thank you for giving us another chance." I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. "Thank you for being honest, Laura. We're stronger now because of it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over us, I realized that despite the hardships, our love had endured. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but with trust, honesty, and a shared commitment to our family, I knew we could face anything together. Life began to regain a sense of normalcy. Laura and I continued our counseling sessions, and our relationship grew stronger with each passing week. We were finding a new rhythm, one built on open communication and mutual respect. But life, ever unpredictable, had more in store for us. It was a Friday evening, and we were all gathered in the living room. Ethan and Jack were playing a board game on the floor, their laughter filling the room. Laura and I were on the couch, enjoying a quiet moment of togetherness. My phone buzzed with a notification, but I ignored it, focusing instead on the warmth of the moment. However, the second buzz and then the third made it impossible to ignore. I picked up my phone, expecting it to be a work email or a message from a friend. Instead, it was a series of texts from an unknown number. Michael, you need to know the truth about Laura. Meet me tomorrow at noon. The coffee shop on Main Street. Don't tell anyone. My heart pounded as I read the message. It felt like a cruel joke, a shadow from the past resurfacing just as we were finding our footing. Laura noticed my change in demeanor. "What's wrong, Michael?" she asked, concern etching her features. I hesitated, not wanting to alarm her, but knowing I couldn't keep this from her. "I just got a strange message. Someone wants to meet me tomorrow to tell me something about you." Her eyes widened in alarm. "Who? What do they want?" "I don't know," I said, showing her the message, "but I'm going to find out." Laura looked scared, and I hated seeing her like that. "Michael, please be careful. I don't want anything to come between us again." "I will," I promised, pulling her into a reassuring hug. "We'll face this together, whatever it is." The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop on Main Street with a sense of dread. I scanned the room, looking for a familiar face, but saw none. A woman approached me, her expression serious. "Michael?" "Yes, that's me," I replied, trying to place her face. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite remember where I'd seen her before. "My name is Rachel," she said, sitting down across from me. "I'm David's sister." David's sister. The revelation took me by surprise. "What do you want, Rachel?" She took a deep breath, looking around as if to ensure no one was listening. "I've been in contact with Laura recently. She told me about the troubles you two have been having, and I thought it was important you know the full story about David." I frowned, my defenses up. "We've been working through things. What does David have to do with it now?" "David wasn't just reaching out to reconnect with Laura," she said, her voice low. "He had other motives. He's been trying to get back at her for breaking off their engagement, and he thinks ruining her marriage will do that." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "David has always had a vindictive streak," Rachel continued. "He was furious when Laura ended things with him, and he's never let it go. When he found out she was happily married, he decided to interfere. He's been lying to you, trying to sow distrust between you and Laura." I felt a surge of anger. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I care about Laura," Rachel said simply. "She doesn't deserve this. Neither do you. I thought you should know the truth before things get any worse." Her words hung in the air, the implications sinking in. I had been so focused on the past that I hadn't seen the true threat looming in the present. "Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate you telling me this." She nodded, standing up to leave. "Good luck, Michael. I hope you and Laura can find the happiness you deserve." I watched her walk away, feeling a mix of relief and anger. David's attempts to sabotage our marriage had almost succeeded, but now I had the truth. I hurried home, eager to share what I'd learned with Laura. When I walked through the door, Laura was waiting, her expression anxious. "Michael, what happened?" I took her hands, looking into her eyes. "I met with Rachel, David's sister. She told me everything. David's been trying to get back at you for ending things with him. He's been lying to us, trying to tear us apart." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes. "I can't believe he would do that. I'm so sorry, Michael." "It's not your fault," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger. We won't let him win." We spent the rest of the day talking, reaffirming our commitment to each other and our family. The knowledge of David's deceit only made us more determined to protect what we had. The next few weeks were challenging as we navigated the emotional fallout of Rachel's revelation. Laura and I leaned on each other, finding strength in our shared determination to move forward. We focused on our boys, on creating a loving and stable environment for them. One evening, as we sat together watching the boys play in the yard, Laura turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Michael, for believing in us, for fighting for our family." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "We're in this together, Laura, no matter what comes our way." As we watched Ethan and Jack laughing and playing, I realized that our love had been tested in ways we never could have anticipated. But through it all, we had found our way back to each other, stronger and more united than ever. And as the sun set on another day, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with love, honesty, and an unbreakable bond. The revelation of David's deception had brought Laura and me closer, but it also left a lingering unease. We had learned to trust each other again, but the knowledge that David had been actively trying to ruin our lives was a dark cloud that we couldn't ignore. One Saturday morning, while we were having breakfast, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, not expecting any visitors. When I opened the door, David stood there, his expression calm, but his eyes filled with malice. "David," I said, my voice cold, "what do you want?" "We need to talk," he replied, his tone equally chilly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, not wanting him to set foot in our home, but I also knew that it was time to end this once and for all. "Fine, but this ends today." He nodded and stepped inside. Laura, who had heard the conversation, looked up from the kitchen, her face pale. "David, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We need to clear the air," he said, sitting down at the dining table. "All of us." I closed the door, and joined them at the table, my anger barely contained. "Say what you need to say, David. Then get out." He looked at Laura, a twisted smile on his lips. "You really thought you could just walk away from our past, didn't you? You thought you could erase everything we had." "David, that's enough," I said, my voice hard. "Whatever issues you have with Laura, you take them up with her directly. You don't try to destroy our family." "You don't get it, do you?" he sneered. "She broke my heart, Michael. She left me without any explanation, without any closure. And then she found happiness with you, like I never existed." Laura took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "David, we ended things because our relationship was toxic. You know that. I didn't want to hurt you, but staying together would have been worse." "Is that what you tell yourself?" he spat. "That you were doing me a favor?" "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you," she said, her voice steady. "But trying to ruin my marriage isn't going to change the past." David laughed bitterly. "Maybe not, but it made me feel better." I stood up, unable to contain my anger any longer. "You've done enough damage, David. Get out of our lives, now." He looked at me, his expression mocking. "Or what, Michael? What are you going to do?" Before I could respond, Laura stood up as well, her eyes blazing with determination. "He doesn't have to do anything, David. I will. You need to leave and never contact us again. If you don't, I will go to the police and file a restraining order." David's face twisted in anger, but he saw the resolve in our eyes. He knew we were serious. "Fine," he said, standing up. "But remember this, Laura. You can't run from your past forever." With that, he walked out the door, slamming it behind him. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and Laura collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." I sat down beside her, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "Yes, it is. We're free of him now." The next few days were tense as we waited to see if David would follow through on his threat. But as time passed with no further contact from him, we began to relax. Our lives slowly returned to normal, the dark cloud of his presence lifting. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the stars, Laura took my hand. "Thank you, Michael, for standing by me through all of this." I squeezed her hand, feeling a deep sense of peace. "We made it through together, Laura. That's what matters." As the stars twinkled above us, I realized that our love had been tested in ways we never could have anticipated. But through it all, we had found our way back to each other, stronger and more united than ever. The final confrontation with David had marked the end of a painful chapter in our lives, but it had also opened the door to a new beginning. We had faced our fears, confronted our past, and emerged on the other side with a deeper understanding of each other and our relationship. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together with love, honesty, and an unbreakable bond. The weeks following our confrontation with David were a period of healing and reflection. The weight of his toxic presence had lifted, leaving room for us to rebuild our lives with a sense of newfound freedom and clarity. Laura and I continued our counseling sessions, deepening our understanding and commitment to one another. One Saturday morning, we decided to take a family trip to the countryside. It was a crisp autumn day, the trees a blaze of reds, oranges, and yellows. Ethan and Jack were excited, their enthusiasm contagious as they chattered in the back seat. As we drove, Laura and I exchanged smiles, the tension of the past months gradually giving way to a sense of peace. We arrived at a charming farmhouse we had rented for the weekend, surrounded by rolling hills and a serene lake. "Wow, this place is amazing," Ethan exclaimed as he jumped out of the car. Jack nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can we go explore, Dad?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "Just stay where we can see you." The boys took off, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. Laura and I unpacked the car, enjoying the quiet moments together. After settling in, we decided to go for a walk by the lake. The scenery was breathtaking, the water reflecting the vibrant colors of the trees. Laura slipped her hand into mine, her touch warm and reassuring. "This is perfect," she said softly. "Just what we needed." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I couldn't agree more. It's a fresh start for us. As we walked, we talked about our hopes and dreams for the future. We discussed our plans for the boys, our aspirations for our careers, and the simple joys we wanted to savor as a family. That evening, we gathered around a fire pit outside the farmhouse. Ethan and Jack roasted marshmallows, their faces glowing in the firelight. Laura leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I love this," she whispered. "Being here with you and the boys, it feels like everything is finally right." I kissed the top of her head, feeling an overwhelming sense of contentment. It does. We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger. The next morning, we woke up early to catch the sunrise over the lake. The sky was painted in hues of pink and gold, the water shimmering like a mirror. We stood together on the dock, the boys between us, wrapped in blankets. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, I felt a profound sense of renewal. It was as if the light was washing away the shadows of the past, illuminating a path forward filled with hope and promise. "Look, Dad, it's beautiful," Ethan said, his eyes wide with wonder. "It really is," I agreed, pulling Laura closer. "It's a new beginning for all of us." We spent the rest of the day exploring the countryside, hiking through the woods, and picnicking by the lake. The boys' laughter filled the air, their joy a testament to the healing power of family and nature. In the evening, as we sat around the fire pit again, Laura looked at me with a soft smile. "I feel like we've turned a corner, Michael. We're stronger and more connected than ever." I nodded, feeling the same sense of certainty. "We have, and no matter what the future holds, we'll face it together." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I realized that our journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, but we had proven that our love could withstand anything. And with that knowledge, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Our love had been tested and had endured, and now we were ready to embrace the future with open hearts and unbreakable spirits. As we sat there, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of our family, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new, brighter chapter in our lives. A chapter filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Returning home from our countryside retreat, we felt a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The fresh air and open skies had given us the clarity and strength we needed to move forward. Laura and I were more determined than ever to nurture our relationship and create a stable, loving environment for our boys. As autumn transitioned into winter, our lives fell into a comforting routine. The boys were thriving at school, and their laughter filled our home with warmth. Laura and I continued to attend counseling sessions, each one deepening our understanding of each other and strengthening our bond. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Laura brought up a topic we had touched on during our trip. "Michael, I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed in the countryside, about our future and our dreams." I looked at her, intrigued. "What about them?" She smiled, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "I think it's time we start planning for those dreams. We've come so far, and I feel ready to take the next step." I nodded, feeling a surge of excitement. "I agree. What do you have in mind?" "Well," she began, "we've always talked about starting our own business, something that combines our skills and passions. What if we opened a small bed and breakfast, a place where we can share our love for nature and hospitality with others?" The idea had always been a distant dream, something we talked about in passing, but now it felt within reach. "I love that idea, Laura. It would be a fresh start, a way for us to build something together." Over the next few months, we began to put our plan into motion. We researched locations, developed a business plan, and sought advice from friends and family. It was a daunting task, but we faced it with enthusiasm and determination. One spring day, we found the perfect property, a charming old farmhouse on the outskirts of a picturesque town. It needed some work, but we saw the potential for our dream to come to life. With the boys' help, we began the process of renovating the house, turning it into a cozy, welcoming bed and breakfast. The work was hard, but it brought us closer together. We spent countless hours painting, decorating, and refurbishing the rooms, each task a labor of love. Ethan and Jack were excited to help, their energy and enthusiasm infectious. As we prepared for our grand opening, we hosted a small gathering for friends and family to celebrate our new venture. The farmhouse was filled with laughter and joy, the culmination of our hard work and determination. Standing on the porch, looking out at the beautiful garden we had cultivated, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Laura came up beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "We did it, Michael. We made our dream come true." I smiled, pulling her close. "We did, and this is just the beginning." Our bed and breakfast quickly became a beloved destination for travelers seeking a peaceful retreat. Laura's talent for creating a warm, inviting atmosphere and my knack for hospitality proved to be a winning combination. Our guests often commented on the love and care we poured into every detail, making their stay memorable. One evening, as we sat on the porch after a busy day, Ethan and Jack joined us, their faces glowing with happiness. "Mom, Dad, this place is amazing," Ethan said, his voice filled with pride. Jack nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, it's like a dream come true." I looked at Laura, our boys' words echoing our own feelings. "It really is," I said, my heart swelling with gratitude. As the stars appeared in the night sky, I realized that our journey had brought us to a place of profound happiness and fulfillment. We had faced challenges and overcome them, emerging stronger and more united than ever. Our bed and breakfast was more than just a business. It was a testament to our resilience and love. It was a place where we could create new memories, not only for our family, but also for the guests who came to share in our dreams. And as we sat there, surrounded by the beauty of our home and the warmth of our family, I knew that the future was bright. We had found our way through the darkness and come out into the light, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead with open hearts and unbreakable spirits. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led us to this moment of peace and happiness. And with Laura by my side, I knew that anything was possible. Our love had endured, and together we would continue to build a life filled with joy, hope, and endless possibilities. As our bed and breakfast flourished, so did our family. The boys grew more confident and happy, making new friends in our quaint town and thriving in their school. Laura and I found joy in our work, knowing that each guest who stayed with us left with a piece of our love and care. One sunny afternoon, as I was preparing to check in a new guest, Laura received an unexpected phone call. It was from Rachel, David's sister. Her voice sounded anxious, and Laura immediately knew something was wrong. "Michael, it's Rachel. She wants to meet us. She says it's urgent," Laura told me, her brow furrowed with concern. "Did she say why?" I asked, feeling a pang of unease. "No, just that it's important, and she needs to see us right away," Laura replied. We arranged to meet Rachel at a cafe in town. When we arrived, we found her sitting at a corner table, her expression troubled. She greeted us with a weak smile, but it was clear that she was deeply worried. "Thank you for meeting me," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, Rachel. What's going on?" I asked, sitting down across from her. "It's about David," she began, looking down at her hands. "He's been struggling a lot since you confronted him. I know he did terrible things to you, but he's my brother, and I can't just stand by and watch him destroy himself." Laura reached out, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's arm. "What can we do to help?" Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes filled with desperation. "David needs help, professional help. He refuses to see a therapist or get any kind of treatment. I was hoping you might be able to talk to him, make him see that he needs to change." I exchanged a glance with Laura. It was a difficult request, given all the pain David had caused us, but we couldn't ignore Rachel's plea for help. "We'll try," I said, my voice steady. "We'll talk to him." Rachel gave us David's address, and we agreed to visit him the next day. The drive to his apartment was filled with a tense silence, both of us unsure of what to expect. When we arrived, David answered the door looking haggard and defeated. He stared at us in surprise, not expecting to see us. "Michael, Laura, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hollow. "We need to talk, David," I said firmly. "Can we come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside to let us in. His apartment was a mess, a reflection of his inner turmoil. We sat down on the couch, and David sank into a chair opposite us, his shoulders slumped. "Rachel told us what's been going on," Laura began gently. "She's worried about you, David, and so are we." David scoffed, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "Why would you care? After everything I've done?" "Because no one deserves to suffer alone," I said, meeting his gaze. "You need help, David. Professional help. You can't keep going on like this." For a moment he looked like he might argue, but then his shoulders sagged even further. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I've ruined everything. It's not too late, Laura said softly. But you have to be willing to take the first step. Let us help you. David looked at us, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. Why would you do that? After all the pain I've caused you? Because everyone deserves a chance to make things right, I replied. You included. With our encouragement, David agreed to seek therapy. Rachel helped him find a reputable therapist, and we promised to support him through the process. It wasn't easy, but over time David began to show signs of improvement. He started taking responsibility for his actions and working towards a healthier, more stable life. The experience had a ripple effect on our own lives. Helping David forced us to confront our own lingering pain and anger, and in doing so, we found a deeper sense of peace and forgiveness. It was a reminder that healing was a continuous journey, one that required compassion and understanding. One evening, as Laura and I sat on the porch of our bed and breakfast watching the sunset, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had come so far, not just as a couple, but as individuals. The trials we had faced had strengthened our bond and deepened our love. Do you think David will be okay? Laura asked, her head resting on my shoulder. I hope so, I said, wrapping my arm around her. He's taking the right steps. That's all we can ask for. Laura nodded, her eyes on the horizon. We've been through so much, but I feel like we're finally in a good place. Our family, our home, everything feels right. I kissed the top of her head, feeling the same sense of contentment. It does, and whatever the future holds, we'll face it together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape, I realized that our journey had brought us to a place of profound understanding and love. We had faced our past, embraced our present, and were ready to welcome the future with open hearts and unbreakable spirits. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of our home and the warmth of our family, I knew that we had truly found our way. Together, we could overcome any challenge and create a life filled with joy, hope, and endless possibilities.